Teo had been salvaging for almost 10 years, and he knew how to find things that other people missed. His ship, the Bright Star, was old and worn, but it was reliable. The salvage trade was not glamorous work. It was dirty, dangerous, and often lonely. Teo worked on the outer edges of known space, far away from the big cities and the major power centers. He picked through abandoned stations, crashed ships, and forgotten colonies. Most people would have found this work boring or depressing, but Teo loved it. He loved the mystery of discovering what had happened to places that people had left behind. He loved the challenge of making his ship run on almost nothing, fixing broken things with whatever materials he could find. On this particular day, Teo was exploring the ruins of an ancient space station called Vex 7. The station was massive, easily 1 kilometer across. It had been abandoned for more than 200 years. Nobody knew exactly why it had been left behind. Some said it was because of a disease. Others said a war had destroyed the colony that lived there. Teo did not care much about the history. He was here because scanning equipment had shown signs of valuable materials in the lowest sections of the station. He moved slowly through the dark hallways, his light suit showing him the way forward. The station was completely quiet, except for the sound of his footsteps. Everything smelled old and empty. There were no sounds of life anywhere. The air was thin and cold, almost too cold to breathe. Teo checked his oxygen levels. He had enough for another 3 hours. That would be enough time to explore and find something valuable. As he walked deeper into the station, Teo noticed the walls had deep marks on them. Not damage from age or weather, but cuts and scars that looked fresh. Very fresh. His heart began to beat faster. Someone had been here recently. He moved more carefully now, one hand resting on the small energy weapon at his side. Salvagers sometimes ran into other salvagers, and not all of them were friendly. Then he heard it. A sound so quiet that at first he thought he had imagined it. It was a breathing sound, but not normal breathing. It was rough and difficult, like someone in pain. Teo followed the sound through a twisted hallway and found himself in what used to be a storage room. And there, lying on the cold floor among piles of broken equipment and scattered wires, was a creature unlike anything Teo had ever seen. She was tall, much taller than a human, maybe 2.5 meters. Her skin was covered in shining scales that were silver in color, with hints of blue running through them like water. Her body was shaped like a human, but stronger, more muscular. But the most striking features were her horns. They were enormous, dark as obsidian, and they curved backward from her head in perfect spirals. She had wings, too, though they looked torn and broken, and she was covered in blood. Teo's first instinct was to run. This was clearly a dangerous creature, but something made him stop. Maybe it was because he saw that she was not moving. Maybe it was because even through her injuries, he could see intelligence in her half-open eyes. Maybe it was simply because Teo had always been someone who helped others when they needed help. He approached slowly and carefully. The creature's eyes moved, following him. She tried to move, but could not. A low sound came from her throat, not quite a roar, but not quite a groan either. It was a sound that meant pain. "It's okay," Teo said softly, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to help you." The creature did not understand his words. Her eyes were filled with fear and confusion. Teo could see deep wounds across her body. There was a long cut running down her left side that had bled a lot. Her right wing was torn in several places. Burns marked her shoulders and arms as if she had been hit with energy weapons. One of her horns had a crack running through it. Teo made a quick decision. He went back to his ship and brought medical supplies. He brought bandages, medicine, water, and a portable medical scanner. He had used these supplies on himself many times, and he had used them to help other salvagers when he had found them in trouble. But he had never used them to help a creature like this. Working carefully and slowly, Teo began to treat her wounds. He cleaned the cuts first, using water to wash away the dried blood. The creature made sounds of pain as he worked, but she did not try to fight him or bite him. She seemed to understand that he was trying to help. Her eyes watched him constantly, studying every move he made. The work took hours. Teo bandaged the worst wounds and applied medicine to the burns. He did not have anything that would work perfectly on dragon skin, but he had general medical supplies that could help any kind of creature. For the terrible cut on her side, he used special bandages that would stop the bleeding and help the wound close. When he finished, the creature was still alive and stable. She had fallen asleep or lost consciousness from the pain. Teo sat back and looked at what he had done. He had just saved the life of a powerful dragon-like creature. He did not know who she was or where she came from. He did not know if she was dangerous or friendly. He did not know if anyone was looking for her or if helping her would bring trouble to his ship. But as he looked at her face in sleep, he saw only someone who had been hurt and alone, and that was enough reason for him to help. Very carefully, Teo picked her up in his arms. She was much heavier than she looked, but he managed to carry her back to his ship. He placed her on a large bed in his medical room. She needed real rest now. She needed warmth and safety and time for her body to heal. Teo sat beside her, watching her breathe. Outside the window, the empty station was just as quiet and forgotten as it had been before. But inside the bright star, everything had changed. A human salvage trader had just brought a mysterious dragon woman onto his ship. Neither of them knew it yet, but this simple act of kindness would change everything that was to come. The dragon woman woke slowly. Her eyes opened first, moving from side to side as she tried to understand where she was. The room around her was small and simple, with metal walls and soft white lighting. It was nothing like anywhere she had ever been before. For a moment, she felt panic rising in her chest. Then she tried to move, and pain shot through her body, reminding her of everything that had happened. She remembered the attack. She remembered the energy weapons firing at her. She remembered the rival faction soldiers coming at her with weapons drawn. She remembered being so tired that she could barely stand. She remembered falling, losing consciousness, and thinking she would not wake up again. But she had woken up. She was alive. The dragon woman looked down at her body. Her wounds had been cleaned and bandaged. Someone had used medicine on her. Someone had helped her. But who? And why? She was Nari, the legendary warrior. People did not help her. People feared her. People tried to kill her or capture her for their own purposes. But nobody simply helped her. The door to the room opened. A human male walked in. He was tall, but not as tall as Nari. He had dark hair and kind eyes. He was carrying a tray with water and some kind of food on it. "You're awake," Teo said with a smile. "That's good. That's very good." Nari did not speak. She did not know if this human could be trusted. She studied his face, trying to understand if there was any threat in his presence. She was trained to read people, to know their intentions from their body language and the expression in their eyes. What she saw in this human was simple kindness. There was no hidden agenda that she could detect. There was no fear, no greed, no desire for power, just kindness. "I know you probably don't understand me," Teo continued, setting the tray on a small table beside the bed. "But you're safe now. Your wounds are stable. I gave you medicine. You should rest." He said this all in a gentle voice, not talking to her like she was dangerous or stupid, but like he was talking to someone he cared about. It was strange. Nari had lived for 300 years, and in all that time, almost nobody had ever spoken to her this way. Over the next few days, something changed between them. Nari slowly began to understand some of Teo's words. She listened carefully as he talked to her while bringing her food and water. She watched as he changed her bandages and checked her wounds. She saw that he genuinely wanted her to get better. He did not ask her anything. He did not demand information about who she was or why she had been hurt. He simply took care of her. On the third day after she woke up, Nari spoke for the first time. Her voice was deep and strong, even though she was weak from her injuries. "Why?" she asked in the trade language that most beings in the galaxy understood. "Why do you help me?" Teo was preparing a meal for her when she asked this question. He stopped and looked at her with surprise. He did not expect her to speak, and especially not in the common language. "Because you needed help," he answered simply. "I found you hurt. I could not just leave you there." "You do not know me," Nari said. "I could be dangerous. I could hurt you." "You could," Teo agreed. "But you are hurt and alone. That is what matters to me right now. The danger can wait. Kindness cannot." Nari did not understand this kind of thinking. In her world, in the world of warriors and fighters, you had to always think about danger first. You had to always be ready to protect yourself. You could not afford to be kind if it meant you might get hurt. But this human was different. He had chosen kindness over safety. "My name is Nari," she said after a long silence. "I'm Tai'o," he replied with a warm smile. "It's nice to officially meet you, Nari." As the days passed and Nari's wounds began to heal, she spent more time talking with Tai'o. She told him where she had come from. She told him about the ship that had attacked her. She told him about the rival faction that had wanted to capture her, but she did not tell him who she really was. She did not tell him that she was Nari the Unstoppable, the warrior whose name was known across 3 star systems. She did not tell him that she was the most dangerous fighter in the galaxy. She did not tell him that people had feared her for centuries. Teo told her about his life. He told her about his salvage ship and his work exploring abandoned places. He told her about the loneliness of traveling through space alone. He told her about how he loved finding things that other people had forgotten about. He told her about the simple joy of fixing broken things and making them work again. One afternoon, as Nari was sitting in the main cabin of the ship, a transmission came through on the communication system. It was a distress signal. A human colony in a nearby system was under attack. The signal was weak and breaking apart, but the message was clear. People were dying. They needed help immediately. Teo immediately began making calculations for a jump to that location. He did not hesitate. He did not think about the danger or the distance or any of the practical problems. He simply heard that people needed help, and he began to help them. Nari watched him work. She saw the determination in his face. She saw how important it was to him to get there as quickly as possible to save these people he did not know. This human who had helped her without asking for anything in return was now risking his life and his ship to help complete strangers. "I will come with you," Nari said. "You're not healed yet," Teo said, not looking away from his controls. "I do not need to be healed to fight," Nari replied. She stood up, and Teo could see the strength returning to her body, even though some of her wounds were still fresh. "You saved my life. Now I will save theirs. This is the way things should be." Teo looked at her for a moment, then nodded. He did not try to argue. He simply accepted her decision and made room for her on his ship as they prepared to jump to the system where the colony was under attack. Neither of them knew that this journey would change everything. Neither of them knew that the moment they arrived at that colony, the entire galaxy would learn who Nari really was. The colony on Kepler-12 was in chaos when Tai'o and Nari arrived. The planet's defensive systems had been damaged by the initial attack. Ships were falling from the sky like burning meteors. Buildings were on fire. People were running through the streets trying to escape the destruction. Teo brought his ship down in the central landing area, knowing that every second counted. He looked at Nari, who was standing beside him with determination in her eyes. Stay close to me, he said. And try not to use your injuries as an excuse. They ran out of the ship together into the smoke and chaos. Teo headed toward the colony's main shelter, where civilians would be hiding. Nari headed toward the sounds of fighting. Teo grabbed her arm. Please, he said, help me get people to safety first. Then we will deal with the soldiers. Nari looked at him. For 300 years, she had fought only for herself and her own interests. Soldiers had always come before civilians in her way of thinking, but this human was asking her to save lives instead of taking them. She nodded. Together, Tayo and Neri moved through the colony. They found civilians hiding in basements and underground tunnels. They guided them to Tayo's ship. Tayo was fast and efficient, but Nari was even better. Her strength allowed her to move obstacles that would have taken Tayo hours to move. She carried children and elderly people, making sure none of them were hurt. As they worked, they could see the enemy soldiers moving closer. The raiders did not know that a human salvage trader and a wounded dragon woman were on the ground. They were focused on destroying the colony and taking what they could. They were not prepared for what was about to happen. When they had moved most of the civilians to safety, Nari told Teo to stay with the ship and protect the people. I will deal with the soldiers, she said. You're still hurt, Teo protested. I will heal when they are defeated, Nari replied. She walked out of the ship toward the enemy forces. At first, the raiders did not understand what they were seeing. A tall dragon woman, moving slowly toward them with no weapons and no armor. They laughed. They thought she was just another confused civilian. Then she moved. What happened next was difficult to explain to those who saw it. It was not really a battle. It was more like a dance, or perhaps a lesson. Nari moved through the raiders with perfect speed and control. She did not kill them all, though she could have. Instead, she incapacitated them. She broke their weapons. She broke their shields. She threw them to the ground and left them unable to fight anymore. The enemy commander, a large alien with 6 arms and a body covered in armor plating, stepped forward. He was a veteran of 100 battles. He was confident in his skills. He raised his weapons and fired at Nari. Nari moved to the side, letting the energy blasts pass by her. She moved forward with incredible speed. Her movements were precise and beautiful, like she was moving in slow motion, even though she was moving very fast. She disarmed the commander and left him lying on the ground, conscious but unable to move. The remaining raiders saw what had happened. They saw their commander defeated. They saw their weapons broken. They understood that they could not win. Some of them ran to their ships and escaped. Others simply surrendered, dropping their weapons to the ground. It took less than 10 minutes. When it was over, Nari walked back to Tayo's ship. She was breathing hard, and some of her wounds had opened up again, causing fresh bleeding. But her eyes were bright with purpose. She had not fought like this in a long time. She had not used her full strength since the day she had decided to stop fighting for power and glory. Teo saw her walking back and ran to meet her. He could see the blood, and he was immediately concerned. "We need to get you back inside," he said, putting his arm around her to support her. The people in the ship began to celebrate. They knew they had been saved, but they did not know who had saved them. They did not understand that the dragon woman who had just defeated an entire army of raiders with almost no effort was the most legendary fighter in the entire galaxy. But others were beginning to figure it out. News of what had happened was spreading. Messages were being sent across the communications networks. People were starting to ask questions. Who was this dragon woman? Where had she come from? And most importantly, why was she traveling with a simple human salvage trader? Within hours, messages began arriving at Tayo's ship. Military leaders wanted information. Corporate representatives wanted to negotiate. Government officials wanted to know everything. But Nari refused to answer any of them. She simply remained aboard the Bright Star, helping Teo with the work of getting the evacuated colonists to a place of safety. Teo finally asked her directly, "You're someone important, aren't you? Someone very important?" Nari looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I was," she said. "I was Nari the Unstoppable. I was a warrior that people feared across 3 star systems. I fought in countless battles. I won every single one of them. But somewhere along the way, I realized that winning battles did not bring me happiness. Being feared did not make my life better. All of that fighting and all of that power meant nothing because I was always alone." She paused and looked at Teo. "Then you found me broken on the floor of an abandoned station. You helped me without knowing who I was. You treated me like I was just another person who needed help. And suddenly I understood what I had been missing all my life. I understood what real strength is." Teo was quiet for a moment, thinking about what she had said. Then he smiled. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "You have me. And I don't care if you're a legendary warrior or a simple dragon woman from nowhere. To me, you're just Nari. And that's enough." In that moment, something changed between them. It was not quite love, at least not yet, but it was the beginning of something deep and real. It was the beginning of a partnership that would shape the future of the entire galaxy. 6 months had passed since the battle at Kepler-12, and everything had changed. The news of Nari's involvement in saving the colony had spread throughout the galaxy like a wave. Every government, every military organization, and every corporation wanted her attention. They wanted her power. They wanted her to fight for them, or help them, or give them her support. The messages never stopped arriving. But Nari had other plans. She and Teo had spent the last 6 months traveling together, learning about each other, and thinking about what they wanted to do with their lives. They had decided on something radical, something that nobody expected from the galaxy's most famous warrior. They were going to change the system itself. Teo had always believed that the big power structures in the galaxy were unfair to smaller worlds and poorer people. Salvagers like him, colonists on the outer edges of known space, traders and workers who could not afford to be part of the major political systems, they were all left behind. They had to survive on their own, using whatever resources they could find. They were treated as second-class citizens, or sometimes not even seen as citizens at all. Nari had seen this too, now that she was traveling with Teo. She had spent her whole life fighting for power and status, but she had never thought about the people who had no power and no status. She had never thought about the families that were left behind when wars happened. She had never thought about the children growing up in colonies that nobody cared about. Together, they came up with a plan. They would create something new. They would form a coalition of worlds that believed in cooperation instead of competition. They would create a system where smaller worlds and poorer people had a voice in how things were decided. And they would ask Nari's supporters and followers to help make this happen. The response was enormous. Many of Nari's old followers wanted to join her new cause. Military officers who respected her started supporting the idea. Traders like Teo, who had felt left out of the major power structures, suddenly had a place to belong. Even some of the smaller governments and corporate groups decided to join the coalition. The first meeting of the Coalition of Worlds took place on a neutral space station. Representatives from 30 different worlds and 50 different groups came to listen to what Nari and Teo had to say. Nari spoke first, explaining her vision. She talked about how she had spent 300 years fighting and how she had realized that fighting did not solve anything. She talked about how a simple act of kindness from a human had taught her more than all those years of victory. Then Teo spoke. He talked about his experiences traveling through the outer colonies. He talked about the families he had met who were struggling to survive. He talked about the resources that were wasted on wars and conflicts that could have been used to help people. He spoke in a simple and direct way, but his words were powerful because they were honest and came from his heart. Not everyone agreed with what they were saying. A major empire called the Sarthian Dominion saw the coalition as a threat to their power. They controlled several large star systems, and they had a military that was very strong. The leaders of the Sarthian Dominion decided that they needed to stop this coalition before it became too powerful. They sent a message to Taio and Nari. The message was simple and clear. Either Nari would come and fight for them, or the Sarthian Dominion would attack the coalition and destroy it completely. They gave them 10 days to decide. Taio was worried. He knew that the military of the Sarthian Dominion was enormous. Even Nari, with all her power and skill, could not fight an entire empire. But Nari seemed calm about the situation. She asked Taio to let her think about this for a while. The next day, Nari came to him with an idea. "Fighting them would be pointless," she said. "Even if I defeated their armies, it would create more conflict, more hatred, more death. What we need to do is make war unprofitable for them." Taio did not understand what she meant at first, so Nari explained. She talked about using economics and trade as weapons instead of violence. She suggested that Taio use his connections in the trading community to create systems where it would be more profitable for the Sarthian Dominion to trade with the coalition than to attack it. She suggested creating agreements that would give the Dominion benefits if they joined the coalition, but would cost them greatly if they started a war. It was a brilliant idea, and it was very different from the way Nari had handled problems in the past. Taio spent the next 8 days working with trade leaders and economic experts. He created a system of agreements and contracts that would give the Sarthian Dominion access to resources they needed very badly, but only if they agreed not to attack the coalition. When the 10th day came, the Sarthian Dominion received the proposal. Their leaders studied it carefully. They saw that what Taio was offering them was actually worth more than what they would gain by attacking the coalition. They also understood that if they attacked, they would lose access to all those resources. After only 3 hours of discussion, the Sarthian Dominion decided to join the coalition instead. Nobody could believe it, a peaceful solution to what everyone thought would be a war, a huge empire choosing cooperation instead of conflict. It was exactly what the coalition had been trying to show was possible. Nari pulled Taio aside after the announcement was made. "I spent 300 years believing that the only way to solve problems was with power and violence," she said. "But you taught me something different. You taught me that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to fight. This works so much better." Taio smiled. "We did this together," he said. "You had the power to protect people. I had the knowledge of how to make peace work. Together, we're stronger than either of us could be alone." The coalition continued to grow. More worlds joined. More systems decided that cooperation was better than conflict. The galaxy began to change. Trade increased. People from different worlds started working together instead of fighting. The wars that had seemed endless and inevitable began to slow down and then stop. At the center of it all was a human salvage trader and a dragon woman warrior, proving that change was possible when people worked together with respect and understanding. 2 years had passed since the coalition was formed, and it had grown stronger and more stable than anyone had expected. Hundreds of worlds had joined. Millions of people were experiencing peace for the first time in their lives. Trade was flowing between different star systems. Scientists and engineers were working together to solve problems instead of fight about them. Everything seemed to be working perfectly. But inside the coalition, there were people who were not happy with how things were going. Jiwan was one of Nari's oldest followers. She had fought beside Nari for more than 200 years. She had stood by her through countless battles and victories. When the coalition was formed, Jiwan had joined enthusiastically. But over time, she had begun to feel that something was wrong. She felt that Nari had become weak. She felt that by choosing peace over power, Nari was betraying everything they had fought for all those years. Ji-won was not the only one who felt this way. There were other old warriors and fighters who believed that the traditional ways were better. They believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. They believed that Nari's partnership with a human had corrupted her judgment. They started talking quietly among themselves, planning something. On a day when the coalition's main council was meeting, Ji-won stood up and made an announcement that shocked everyone. She said that she was challenging Nari's leadership. She said that they should return to the old ways, the ways of strength and power. She said that Nari was no longer fit to lead because she had become too influenced by human thinking. And to settle this challenge officially, she demanded a combat match with Nari. The council chamber went silent. According to the old laws of the Dragon Warriors, a challenge could not be refused. If Nari refused to fight, she would lose all credibility and authority. The coalition would fall apart. But if she fought, there was a real possibility that she could be defeated. Ji-won was one of the few warriors in the entire galaxy who was skilled enough to actually challenge her. Teo stood up in the council chamber. "Wait," he said. "Before we make this decision, let me say something." Everyone looked at him. A human speaking in a dragon warrior challenge was unusual. But Teo was no longer just a salvage trader. He was one of the leaders of the coalition. People listened when he spoke. "I understand that you all have old traditions," Teo began. "I understand that for a very long time combat was how you settled disagreements, and I respect that tradition. But I want to ask something. What do you fight for? Do you fight to prove you are strong? Or do you fight to create something better for your people?" He paused, looking directly at Ji-won. "You have fought beside Nari for 200 years. You must know her better than anyone here. Do you honestly believe she has become weak? Or do you believe she has become wise?" "Wisdom without strength is useless," Ji-won said coldly. "Strength is all that matters." "Is it?" Teo asked. 2 years ago, the Sarthian Dominion was about to attack us. Nari is strong enough that she could have fought them. She could have defeated them in combat. But instead, she used wisdom. She used peace. And now, the Sarthian Dominion is part of our coalition. Hundreds of thousands of people who would have died in that war are still alive. Did wisdom make us weaker, or did it make us stronger? Ji-won was quiet for a moment. Teo continued. "I am human," he said. "I am not a warrior. I am not stronger or faster or more powerful than any dragon. But I have something that warriors sometimes forget about. I have the ability to see things from a different perspective. And from my perspective, I can tell you that what Nari is building is incredible. It is changing the galaxy. It is saving lives instead of taking them." He looked around at the entire council. "If Nari fights Ji-won, one of them will probably die. Maybe Ji-won will be the victor. Then what? Do we go back to endless fighting? Or do we do something different?" Teo turned back to Ji-won. "You have fought with Nari longer than anyone. You know she is the strongest warrior in the galaxy. But is that what you want to fight about? Is that all you care about? Or can you imagine a future where we use our strength to build things instead of destroy them?" The council chamber was completely silent now. Everyone was listening to Teo. Even people who did not like humans were paying attention to what he was saying. Ji-won stood up slowly. She looked at Teo for a long moment. Then she looked at Nari. For hundreds of years, she had followed Nari because Nari was the strongest. But she had also followed her because Nari was wise and brave and true. She had never stopped to think about whether strength was the only thing that mattered. "You are right," Ji-won said finally. "I have been thinking about this the wrong way." She turned to face Nari. Then, in a gesture that had not been seen in Dragon Warrior culture for centuries, she knelt down. It was not a gesture of defeat. It was a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. It meant that she accepted Nari's leadership not because she had won a combat, but because she truly believed in what Nari was doing. "I have been blind," Jiwan said in a voice that was heard by everyone in the council. "I was so focused on strength that I could not see wisdom. I challenge you no longer. Instead, I ask to work with you. I ask to help build this new future you are creating, and I promise that I will fight to protect the peace we have created just as fiercely as I would fight in any war." Nari helped Jiwan stand. The two old warriors looked at each other and something passed between them. It was an understanding, a shared knowledge of everything they had been through together. "Thank you," Nari said simply. "We need people like you. People who understand both the old ways and the new ways." The council began to applaud. The challenge had been resolved without violence. A warrior had been convinced to lay down her old ways and embrace a new vision for the future. It was not something that happened often in the history of the galaxy. But it showed that change was truly possible. Teo watched from the side of the council chamber. He had not fought this battle with weapons. He had fought it with words and ideas, and somehow that had been enough. He realized in that moment that maybe his role in the coalition was just as important as Nari's. They were powerful because they were different. They were effective because they complemented each other. That night, Nari and Tayo stood together, looking out at the stars from the observation deck of their ship. "You saved me again today," Nari said. "I just said some words," Teo replied. "You did more than that," Nari said. "You showed everyone that there is a better way to solve problems. You showed them that a human and a dragon can work together. You showed them that this new way we are building is worth fighting for." She took his hand. "I do not know what the future will bring, but I know that whatever comes, I want to face it with you at my side."